You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Hi, I'm Davey.
And I'm Mitch.
And we are
the Bargain Bin Gamers.
Woo!
Woo! What was that?
I don't know. I was just excited to be here.
Oh my God, me too.
I know. Like, we're actually in a properly sound-treated room.
Mm-hmm. I've got those little...
And not my spare bedroom.
Hey, listen, there's no spiky little foam things on your bedroom wall, but
Exactly.
it's still home.
We have saved so much money from Bargain Bin Gaming that we've been able to splash out on a professional studio today.
Look at us, professional podcasters.
I know, all right. That media pass at PAX, if you're watching, coming at me.
Watch out, by the way. And I know you're listening, PAX.
Yeah, influencers. Right here, we have shirts. Yep. Okay.
Influencing something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool. Hey, Ben.
I've been fantastic.
Mhm.
Had a really good time at Melbourne Gamers last night.
Yes.
Shout out to the Melbourne Gamers.
Jake and Warren, good work.
Mhm.
First ever event at Fortress Melbourne, which
Correct.
was really exciting.
It was banging.
Really well attended.
120 people.
120 people. Yeah, exactly. And
I
that
thought
was,
there was going to be 30.
exactly. And like they were on the show recently and they spoke about, you know, how they needed the event to be a success.
And it
Because
banged.
if basically like, oh, we're going to make Fortress some money so that they'll invite us back and do more things.
Well, Fortress got a lot of my money because I had a lot of cider.
Exactly. I mean, you were there splayed out on every table.
I was not playing on every table. I was playing on a single table, and you all were playing a cute game where you all had to flirt with me, and it was pretty sound.
I know. We played a really, really fun game called Red Flags.
Yeah.
Which was a dating game of sorts.
And
where
some of those red flags were green flags.
I just liked, so basically the premise of the game was that you had to try and convince a single person at the table to date you and then sabotage the other people at the table
With some red flags.
with red flags.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I know Mitch really well. And all of these red flags are things that are going to really turn him on.
Unfortunately. So
So
Davey won most of those rounds.
yeah. It's like all of this stuff that's like degrading sexually. I'm like,
Hey. Don't need to tell the listeners and the viewers. However, if we would like to know more, our Patreon is available.
Uncut version there, Mitch
We're
Talbot
cutting that out.
After Dark.
Oh my God.
I do the editing in the moment.
I know it's such a harsh edit on me as well. You know that you do all the editing because you always look great, and then there's me like, ugh, saying dumb stuff. Anyway,
Anyway,
what are we here for today?
well, we have a guest who's just sitting here awkwardly
Listening to us talk about our life.
Normally, it's just someone in the waiting room on StreamYard whilst we just yap on. But now we've got someone who's actually awkwardly sitting here.
Mhm.
It's today we've got Luke, the lead organizer of the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival.
Mhm.
Luke, welcome to the Bargain Bin Gamers.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you. Hello, listeners. Hello, viewers.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Hello, hostages that
Hello,
are
yes.
stuck listening to us.
Welcome to the show.
Mhm.
How have you been?
Busy in middle of the year. Winter's coming in. It's just, I'm in goblin mode. My beard's never been this long, actually.
Oh, really?
So my obsession at the moment is my beard because I'm just letting it go. And I woke up the other night and I think it actually was trying to smother me to death. It was sort of like... So if I refer to it, it's because there's like 4 of us in the room at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
We should get a separate camera just for
Yeah.
it, honestly.
Yeah.
I'll buy it a
yeah.
Christmas card.
You can have a media pasta pack.
I'm in my Papa Smurf era, I think.
Fair
I've been
enough.
looking for a red beanie.
The beard did surprise me when we met you at the bar over the road before recording because I found I keep telling you that I stalked you online. I was doing my research on
This is going to be used in a criminal case one day, by the way.
There's like a
Continue
YouTube
talking.
clip of you giving a talk about gaming or
Yes.
making a game,
Yeah.
and you did not have the beard in that.
That's like 15 years ago.
Okay, yes, I was
So
just like-
that's, yeah. So I made a little game about 15 years ago and it was in a programming language called Python. So my
that's cool.
background is software engineering
Mm.
and it's one of the few games made in Python. So I went to a convention for Python developers and I gave a talk. It was my big gay adventure.
So this is actually a really exciting time for us and a bit of a bookend to a bit of a journey that we've been on as a podcast and a show.
An amazing journey.
That was good.
I know.
I like that.
You're welcome. Because for the last couple of months, we've really dived into queer indie gaming in a really, really big way. And we've been playing a lot of games in the developed by queer developers or with queer themes. And we've been meeting a lot of the creators behind it. Those games almost all exclusively, I think except for Nocturnals, all came from the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival, which you are one of the people behind. So it was really exciting when I managed to find you and track you down and twist your arm and be like, oh my God, we love your work. Please come on the show.
Where's your beard?
So that was really cool. I didn't even know that there was a Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival until we decided to start going down this path. But I guess, let's start with the obvious, right? For the uninitiated out there, what is the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival and how did it come to be?
Sure. Well, the Queer Gaming Festival, it's an extremely lo-fi event held online once a year. Normally coincides with Melbourne Games Week, but we're not particularly linked to that. But it's just about, finding games from around the world made by queer developers or just queer games. And we can get into what a queer game is a bit later if you want.
Of course.
Just finding these queer games and just sort of holding them up and going, hey, everybody, look at these. There's actually something really special going on in this sort of little corner of the world at the moment. And you should just really take a look.
It's nothing fancy in its presentation. It's like literally just, here's a list of queer games you should probably try and play.
Well, we make it look simple, but there's a lot goes under the hood to make it look that simple.
I bet.
So,
Well, that's what happens when you're the head honcho. So.
Yeah.
And so
this means I get the good seat on the couch when we're playing them. So
and from that, what was the inspiration around the start of this? What was the inception piece of this?
Sure. Well, I mean, how far back do you want to go? But basically, growing up, there were no gay characters in any of the media that I consumed as a kid. I think it's probably really hard for people listening today to understand what that world was like. But literally, gay men just did not exist in the books, the films, the TV shows, the music, the art that I grew up with. I'm sure it was out there. There were always people who've been making this sort of stuff, but it just wasn't there for me. And then just growing up with games, there was someone, I think The Sims had gay marriage.
Accidentally, apparently.
Yeah. And there was a big pushback about that. And, people saying, oh, why can't we have gay characters in games? And I was walking down the street sort of going, it's just really unfair that we're not actually asking for much. We're actually just asking to be in the things that we love.
Yeah.
So I'll make a game. So I made a gay game, and then I really enjoyed that. And I got tapped into other people's sort of world, but it was kind of tough to sell it because you would Google gay game, and Google would autocorrect it to worst games.
Are you for real?
I am for real because
wow.
that's Google. Google makes those associations based on what it trolls.
Yeah, of course, and gay was
because
slang
gaming used to a negative,
especially in gaming. It's like, oh, that's such a gay game.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll just start making a list of the gayest games of the year, and that phrase was so kind of weirdly construed at the time, just to say the phrase, "These are the gayest games of the year." It was like really reclaiming a slur.
Yeah.
And that list just got longer and longer every year. And I thought, well, after 3 or 4 years, I was like, well, it's basically a festival now. Let's just take it that one step level and start playing the games and sending out press releases and stuff like that. So that's it. That's the long way round. But yeah, that's how it got started, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic.
What was on that first list? What year was that?
The first list or the first festival?
Let's go with the first list.
We're really picking that brain
is
today.
no, mate. That would have been about 2015, 2014.
Okay. Which you think is not that long ago, but it was
a
10
decade
years.
ago, yeah.
10 years
But
ago.
I mean,
thought of
that's
that.
the thing about it is you could actually find all the gay games made that year and put them on a list. That's I think so crazy now to think about that. The first list was 12 or 16 games, and you'd miss some. And then once again, it comes down to what is a queer game, what is a gay game. But yeah, the ones that were kind of like I guess festival ready games, you could count on 2 hands, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what sort of when you did go to a festival then? So what were some of the games that were What were some of the games that was like, okay, this is now tipped over the point where there is the representation is building and we can actually start celebrating this more than just a list on a Reddit somewhere.
Yeah, well, I think the reason the festivals last so long is that first year was so sort of proved the concept. I think there were 20 to 30 games. There was mostly outreach. Like we would send out the email saying, hey, we like your game. Think about sending it in to us. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And then you just look at those games, those shortlisted games. There's variety and there's depth and they're queer, like unapologetically queer. Like it's indefinable in a way. It's some sort of combination of characters or worldview or mechanics or something. Like there are plenty of games nowadays with gay characters in it or queer characters in it, but here are ones that are kind of made as queer objects or artifacts. Yeah, and that's just that first something fruit, strange fruit, and it's like a beat 'em up. But it's X-rated, so I don't recommend. It's just underage people like showing it off at school.
If
or
I
something
get some footage of it, I'll put a content
it's
warning
like,
up.
it's sort of you walk around, and it's like done in the style of those old beat 'em ups where you're walking on the street beating up the villains.
Yeah, like Double Dragon or something.
Yeah,
like that.
except that it's you defeat them through, I guess, non-violent means.
Right.
There's something just really queer about non-violence in a way in gaming, especially. Then there's Jenediah as well. Jenediah to this day is still a fabulous game in the post-apocalyptic Earth. It's a sort of visual novel. And you're just this person, or you're this sort of creature, sort of going around this post-apocalyptic landscape, meeting other kind of creatures like, a ball of slime or a four-headed wolf or a, glowing tetrahedron sort of thing. And just going, I came across these ruins and they were talking about this thing called gender. And I'm just like, what is gender? And you're just talking to all these different creatures and you're all trying to kind of explain what gender is. And the game's kind of point is like, it was just all a construct, And I just think that was probably made in 2015, 2016. And then just the last 10 years of debate and culture war over that very topic. And this was a game that was just there right at the beginning with a clear vision of it, with something to say, like passionate, funny, political.
A little bit tongue-in-cheek as
well. A little bit, but scathing as well. And just like, this is something, this is real, you know?
Well, it makes sense at the end of the world. The fuck's the point of that? Who cares who uses what bathroom? It doesn't really matter. So.
Well, when you're a ball of energy floating through space, like what does it mean?
Honestly, I felt like that some days.
Yes.
After all those ciders you drank last night at
Gaymers. Girl, sorry to anyone I met there, by the way. I'm addressing you, Camera. So something I wanted to just quickly ask, just while we were kind of at that point, you mentioned that it was like the gayest games, and obviously it's kind of transitioned. Into the queerest games. When did you make that change? Was it like something really important to you?
Well, the terminology changes very fast. The only consistency maybe in the queer community, the gay community, is it should be inclusive and maybe a bit political too, but it really is just about saying everybody is welcome. But I think everybody who, works in any kind of queer community role is just hyper aware that they themselves can't represent every, letter of the rainbow alphabet kind of thing. Yeah, so it's just a constant case of saying, you are welcome, this is also for you. And I know I'm, some person on the other side of the planet. Most of the games come from overseas, and so you kind of say, I'm a cis gay man. You're just aware of that, and it's just always going, no, this is for everybody.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I don't know, I feel like when I was a bit younger, maybe you guys could talk on this a little bit differently, but queer was like a slur. But now I think of queer as like a fabulous umbrella term to kind of cover everyone, no matter where you kind of fall. Was that like the intention, I guess, to be like super inclusive and be like, well, it's for everyone, no matter where you fall into?
Well, I came at it from, this outer suburban kid who didn't really know the terminology, who kind of had to learn it all himself. And so my entry was making like a commercial gay game. But most of the other games in that sort of mind space, is that even a word? I don't know. In that kind of space, there's a sort of a more sort of almost an academic aspect to it. This is in about 2010, 2012. And so looking at what other people were doing in the same space they talked about it in queer games and queer creators and everything.
Yeah.
And also a big inspiration for the festival is the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, which is, like Gay Christmas here.
At what point did it kind of switch from you kind of having to reach out to, your favorite developers and your favorite games to people actually nominating other games? Because I know the people that we've spoken to have said that they were nominated to be in the festival.
Oh, by the second year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
we just had people sending stuff in. Yeah. I mean, because there's space for it. I mean, a big part of the festival, it is about holding these games up and sort of, it is for everybody on the planet, but I guess also for Melbourne to sort of say, look, here are these things. But going back to that thing about holding it up for everyone to see, what does that actually mean practically? And part of it is about giving the developers, creating space for them to talk about their own games.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's very, very hard to, if you're a solo dev in any kind of field, like a writer or a musician or whatever, you're always selling in a way. There's only so many times you can do a social media post about, hey guys, check out my new thing.
Yeah.
And just by able to say, oh, hey, we've been shortlisted in the festival, that creates space where they can say something about their games, and so.
Are there other similar celebrations of queer gaming in Australia or any others in the world that you're aware of?
You always think, oh, we're the only people doing these things. And then you find out, oh, there were some people in, New Zealand doing it in the 80s kind of thing. So,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, there's Melbourne Gamers, who you mentioned earlier. I mean, they are more mainstream gamers, but, they're always.
It's a different thing, Melbourne Gamers. Melbourne Gamers is getting the community together to play games together, like board games and stuff like that.
But it's a queer space.
It is absolutely. It's the same. Yeah, you're right. It's the same kind of deal. Yeah.
There's a queer games convention that runs sporadically in North America. But that, once again, that's more academic. But I mean, I wish I had an academic mind. I think an academic mind is one of the most beautiful things there is. But I don't have it, so I'm a bit more like, oh, here's the medals. Whereas they're a bit more like, what makes it? Why are we doing this? What is it all about? Gaming Magazine has a bit of a thing happening at the moment.
Yeah, they do actually. Yeah. They've got a big award scene going on. We need to do that as an episode later, by the way.
Coming soon. After Pokemon Emerald Sea Class. I will die on that hill.
And the Queer Games Bundle. A special shout out to that. That's a once-a-year event on Itch. And that's... Yeah, I mean, that is functionally very similar to the Queer Games Festival. It really is just about sort of the developers putting them front and center and saying, hey, everyone, check out these games.
And what's kind of the reception been like since it started? Because it's obviously come quite a bit of a way.
Yeah.
What's the reception been like, not only just from the developers, but from the player community as well?
Yeah, I mean, the first few years, there was a lot more explaining what video games were and what queer games were and what makes a queer game. And but now I think people are a lot more receptive to the idea.
Was there any specific feedback that you got that has helped you kind of shape where you've gone, the trajectory of the Queer Games Festival?
The games we get there are trends over the years. Trans games have been very big lately. But then also from, I guess, the more developer side of it, I definitely do sense that developers are a bit more like, oh, could this be bigger? Could there be an evening where we, present these things, or is there a place, a physical place where the games are on display, or are you going to be printing up the medals like little statues and sending them out or something? And you just kind of sense that because the games are getting more professional, and so I think there's this case of, if the vibe has changed slightly, I think that's probably where it is.
I guess maybe not to put words in your mouth, but as it gets bigger, it probably gets a little bit more professional. So then maybe the expectation of the event would raise with it. So is that kind of what you mean?
I mean, there's the commercial side of it too, but no, it's really just sort of goodwill almost. It's just kind of like, oh, we love this thing. We want it to flourish and grow, and this is what it would look like flourishing to me as a developer. Things like that.
We're queer. We like to do stuff on the cheap anyway. So.
Yeah. One of the great things about this whole process is just talking to queer people and getting their killer lines.
Oh yeah.
And one of the ones that I just totally crib is queer lives are messy. you know, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that explains a lot. So
that explains how you got here.
Yeah.
I think that even works on the developer side because when we spoke to Nico the other week, developer Kitsune Tales, like she just said, "Look, we're just a bunch of impoverished queers."
Yeah.
I thought was the most
100%.
Just a bunch of impoverished queers trying to make a video game.
Just trying to express ourselves.
The most expensive most professional indie game is literally just 2 or 3 people, probably in their bedrooms or at a desk somewhere in some corner of some co-working space. Like there is not much, there's no evil machine behind it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we've seen that with a lot of the games we've played. One game that I don't think was in the festival, but we really loved was Nocturnals. I don't know if you've ever come across that. But
you named the one queer game I haven't played.
But it's funny, and we highly recommend it. When we met Max, who developed that, 21 years old, made it as a love letter by himself to his boyfriend Pablo, which is super sweet, by the way. Young love.
No, I'm going to stop you right there and just go. That is like beyond super sweet. That is like a realness that mainstream gaming just doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a lifeblood that you won't find anywhere else.
Exactly.
All by himself.
Yeah.
Pablo did the music.
Yeah.
And a couple of his mates did like the voice acting.
Yeah.
And no budget, nothing at all. No one got paid. Like they just did it for the love of it. And that game has been so popular.
Yeah.
Like he's made enough money from it to now be working on a sequel with better tech, a better engine, better graphics, all that kind of stuff. But like you said, just 1 or 2 people. Like literally, they're 2 uni students in the UK, and they do this in their spare time.
But having people coming back with their second and third game is really, really great to see. This is that professionalization of it a bit.
Yeah.
It's just the skills are there. We have games coming in now where, so the first few years, it was people who had sort of aped a genre and made a queer game. So they go, I have a story, I like visual novels, I have a queer story to tell, so I'm going to make a visual novel that's queer. But we have people who now have grown up with queer visual novels. And they're writing their own ones. And it's hard to put into words. They swim in that world.
Yeah.
They don't have to discover it. And they bring to it this eye. It's like, oh, I love them, but the pacing was a bit off, or the graphics could have been better, or they could have combined some RPG elements or something. And so they bringing that kind of that eye to it that you only get from second, third generation sort of goes.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head where you were like, they were basically born into it. Like they didn't have to pioneer. Like they came up to it and it was around them at all moments so they could innovate on it. They weren't starting from the base and it was like a passion project.
That's games.
Theirs was passion, but it was, I guess they could just innovate on it. So,
but that's games in general. I mean, I hang out at, there's a game developer co-op in Collingwood called Sabby. And I'm Methuselah. I'm like the oldest person by about 3 times there. So they're all just kids. But the way they talk about games, is like this. It's just slightly different to when I was a kid, I guess. I can't quite put it into words. It's just they look at it critically and academically, and they talk about it, I guess, like we would talk about film. The fads and the color grading and things like that. That's just how they talk about games now. And like that can only come from, being born into it.
Well, it's interesting to see how queer game development has been actually embraced as a queer art form. For decades, I've seen the debate rage on, are video games art and all that kind of thing. But I feel like when and we've been playing a lot of these games lately, I do feel, wow, no, there's so much more passion behind it. Yeah. And you can kind of go on the journey with these devs as well. Because a few of the people we've met, like we met Aaron, who made Straight.
Yep.
Yeah. He has developed a whole community on Discord and Patreon around his game who have been, as he's released chapter after chapter of this visual novel, people have been invested in,
to the point where they're like, what have you done with my characters?
Exactly,
Like they genuinely are like, these are my characters
amazing.
now.
Yeah. But like, and that's, if you're writing like a novel or something like that, you rely on that feedback to improve the story and improve the characters. And these people are doing the same thing with these games, whether they're making a Kitsune Tales with, a cute little story underneath a really hard platform or a visual novel, which is really cool.
Well, there's that there was one game that came in a few years ago, I think from Argentina or South America somewhere, and it was called Hit Me. And it was about a young man who he goes out at night, using the dating pro apps and all that stuff. He wants to find a guy who will hit him in a way that it's confronting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is confronting. And in a vacuum, it's a very problematic. It's a problematic concept, you know.
Yeah.
But in the context of queer culture and queer gaming, it had a lot to say, you know, and that's just what I was challenged. I was challenged on it, whatever. But here, the twist in the tale or the footnote or whatever, the next chapter, Hit Me 3 came out last year.
Wow.
And so the developer's gone back to the story a couple of times. And, so at the end, it's not really my story to tell, but spoilers. At the end of Hit Me, he finds two guys that can fulfill that for him, and they form a loving relationship.
Yep.
And the second one is about that throuple sort of going through their things. And Hit Me 3 is continuing that story where one of them wants to make a film about the night they first met. And they have to kind of collect all the stuff and get their friends involved and everything. But the third one is in 3D. So the first one is a visual novel, sort of hand-drawn. And the third one, which is 4, 5, 6 years later, is a full-blown 3D game.
Oh, wow.
And you just sort of, that growth is just so impressive,
Yeah. And I guess it's good, maybe I might be speaking for you in this instance, but seeing games that you see at the grassroots beginning, and because of maybe a platform that you might have given them, maybe because of some of the accolades they might have gotten.
I mean,
we'll just say yes.
You're like, yes, it's all me.
Like they've actually been able to flourish and actually become a thing. Whereas without, I guess, you would call it a platform, let's call it what it is, a platform, they wouldn't have that kind of reach and audience. So I guess maybe for you, I guess that'd be kind of a proud dad moment.
It's more,
you get to play it.
That person, no, I get to play it. That's the real, the great thing about it. No, but that person got it all cross-line by themselves and with their friends or whatever. But it's more platforms like Itch, which happily supports independent games and things like the Queer Games Bundle, which actually get a bit of money into their pocket. Those are kind of really important things. Yeah.
You use the term judge, but what are you actually judging, if anything?
There's a sort of a school of thought in queerdom that we shouldn't queer rank. And so the toughest part of the festival is, we award these medals. I always think the medals are about creating space. Literally, that's all it is. It's just so people can do another social media post saying, oh, look, we got bronze at this thing in Melbourne. You know, certainly wouldn't say a game that didn't get a medal was any less than the ones that did, because there's a holistic approach to it a bit. Yeah, but no, we judge and we sort of look at the graphics and the polish and the X factor as well, all of that. So
yeah, I did notice that. I mean, last year was the first year that we came across the work that you're doing, and when you sent out the shortlist and the awards, I noticed in the email you were very intentional in saying, whilst we've given awards, that all queer art is good art. Please review the list because you've got pictures and little captions there and everything. Go and try everything, really.
Well, I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
We've all entered I'm pretty sure 99% have entered something they've loved into something somewhere.
Yeah.
And you feel you get the sweaty armpits.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I can tell you the people on the other side of those submissions, they have sweaty armpits having to make those calls. So
Well, that's kind of something that we noticed when we were interviewing a lot of these developers, was that this is like their little babies. they've put like their blood and sweat and tears, and some of them have quite like small development teams, so it's a lot of like time sacrificed, and so I can only imagine having to judge someone's like passion project would be super stressful.
You have to opt in to the judging
when
when you send the game in. You have to say so I would say maybe 1 in 10 games they are happy to be in the showcase, but they don't want to be part of the
just listed on the side.
Yeah. And I'm like, that person gets it, really.
Well, and so many of these are like, actually not so many. Some are people who have just quit their day jobs and have thrown themselves into it because they're getting enough money from Patreon or itch to just sort of get by and make their games. Yeah. Whereas others have taken, like in the example of QueerQuest, Mo from Queemo Games took
how good is that? How good is Mo?
But it took Mo over 10 years. Whenever they could get enough money in their paycheck to send out to the small little independent team that they had developed, they're like, all right, I can pay you for 10 hours work this month, this person doing my artwork or this person doing my music.
Just a quick recap for people who have kind of not been following it over. QueerQuest is a game that got gold in last year's festival, and you did an amazing interview a few podcasts ago with the creator. I wish I was able to interview these people and chat with them, but I kind of don't want to know about the people making the games, because to me, I really just want it to be about the games. So it was amazing to actually hear Mo's story, but something about QueerQuest that I think is super interesting is that we were talking about second, third generation games earlier. That probably, those first generation queer games, those very, very first generation queer games are like the 1990s kind of thing. But when we think of like the queer academic kind of version, that's 2010-ish. But it got replaced very quickly by second, third generation games. But because QueerQuest was in development for so long, it's maybe the last of those sort of first generation queer games. So it's a very special artifact, I think.
It definitely feels like it comes from a little bit of a different time compared
to
some of the others.
It's set made 10 years ago, but then also set 10 years before that. So
in the place where they were living at the time. And Mo happily describes it as a time capsule.
Like I love that game, obviously, but listening to that podcast and Mo was just describing how, they're real people and these are real things they said to me. I was a bit like, oh, wow. Okay, that's a level of realism that I didn't know games could get into that, really.
I mean, they were very deliberate about going out and saying, you're going to be in the game. I know as a writer, like, you've got to be very careful about representing real people in any kind of story or medium like that. But they're like, no, you're going to be in this game. You're the Australian girl
that smoking weed and left their shirt at someone's house.
This is exactly what this person would do. They would leave their shirt at the orgy. And and that's that.
When it comes to that X factor that you mentioned before, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean to the judges or you guys?
Or in a game,
or in a game, just in general,
Well, I mean, X factor is the indefinable. So thank you for your impossible question to answer.
I'm just trying to hit you with those hard ones.
Wants a job on Sunrise.
I'm going for Jane Bunn's role.
She's a weather woman.
I mean, you just want games that speak to you, and there's a certain cleverness to them. I mean, things that leap out at me were games like Jenediah, which I mentioned earlier, but he effed the girl out of me, which came out a few years ago. That's autobiographical, but or semi-autobiographical, about a person who falls into sex work, which is illegal in their country, legal here, but illegal there, and it's just a totally and you go on that journey with this person. There's a moment, I actually remember it. So the night after your first job, you're walking home and the street's empty. And it's just this 30-second moment in this game where you're just walking down this empty street and it's like everything's the same, but everything's different. I thought the world would kind of care, but I think we've all had those moments where we've just been walking home the night after something's gone wrong or something's gone right, and everything's a little bit bright but not bright. And it's the same world, but it's different. I've never seen that captured in a game until that game.
That's so interesting. Like, even you just saying that has made me like remember a feeling like that. Which there you go. There's that X factor we were thinking about.
There is absolutely a lot of hurt in a lot of the games we get, but there's also a lot of comedy,
and a lot of joy,
and a lot of joy.
There's something interesting, I think, about just the sheer diversity in experience that queer people seem to be creating in games. Because like we said, there's everything from platformers to interactive stories. I'm sure there's probably some first-person shooters. There's beat-em-ups. There's all kinds of things. And they're all just tapping into these interesting, unique, emotional kind of experiences. It's almost like we get to tell our stories in a different way that just we haven't been able to before. But I think this is a good segue into what is the golden question when it comes to something like this. And that is
what I ask hard questions.
What makes it a queer game?
Yes. Well, I think we're all on a voyage on that. I mean, to me, just really fundamental about it, computers are queer. You know, you think if life is about being born and growth and reproducing and dying, and anything that's not life is strange or other or queer, you know, there's not much more queer than the space inside a computer, which is all entirely the product of human thought. It's literally, it's not anchored to reality in any way. So I think games are inherently a queer medium. So you say, oh, what's a queer game? I'm kind of like, I'm sorry to tell people who don't like who think they're straight or who think they're normal. I hate to break it to you, but humans are pretty much the queerest, weirdest creatures on the planet. And nothing exemplifies that more than the games we make, you know. So that's my starting point. So I'm very liberal. I'm very open to
all
most
games are queer games.
Basically, if you send it in, you just have to say, I affirm that this is a queer game and we do accept it. But like on a more practical level.
I was going to say, that was very philosophical.
Everyone's welcome.
You know, it starts off, it can be as simple as it's got queer characters in it. You know, if you get a game about two boyfriends, you know, and maybe it's a shooting game, but it just happens to be a gay character. That can be a queer game, but then perhaps they're doing queer things, like it's a coming out story, or you know, it's political in a way, like they're not allowed into the hospital when their partner's dying, sort of thing. But then there's something like a queer worldview, so that's sort of like queer people existing in a real world. But then you can have a whole queer worldview, and I think Queer Quest is a really good example of that. I should be mixing up by mentioning like 100 different games. We'll come back to a couple of ones, the same few ones, but you know, just where the vibe is queer, is just sort of they living in a queer space. But then sort of there's this level below it, which is really rare and really hard to do, like sort of queer mechanics. So games are not just about the narrative and the story. It's also about how we interact with the artifact. And, you know, we think of like pressing buttons or you're moving the mouse or whatever. But some game developers have thought about, is there a queer way to interact? And, you know, so Robert Yang is super famous in queer dev circles for like a game where you sort of have to stroke, like you're in love with your car and you kind of have to stroke the gear stick to kind of get it to go kind of thing. Or
right.
But just kind of rethinking that. And there is a person, I think they're in Melbourne, I think they're in Australia, definitely, called Snowden. Oh, I would have to look that up. No, and they do tiny little games. Like one's called Pretzel After Dark, and it sounds a little bit like your red flag thing the other night. Where it's sort of like a Twister, but it's like, oh, put your elbow on your boyfriend's elbow, and then you press, and it'll spin it again, and it'll be like, oh, you know, and it can be a bit ruder kind of thing, but not lewd or anything. Just kind of like, we're queer people and our bodies are part of the game kind of thing. So there's a whole it's never ending really what a queer game can be.
That's really interesting as well. Like thinking about like how you can go to that depth of like mechanics of the game being queer. Because I guess in my shallow little brain, it's like, oh yeah, it's a queer characters. They're talking about queer stories. But yeah, there's like a whole like third or fourth dimension that you could possibly go to. So.
But that's super advanced. Like it's very hard for people to get there. But I genuinely think there are things being done in queer games that will end up in mainstream gaming and have started to. And obviously there are other like people who aren't queer doing similar things. Like I don't want to say it's exclusive, but one thing that I come back to is queer games often care about the mental health of the player.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of like meditation games in the festival, which is just play this game and it's just a 5-minute walk through a garden to focus on your breathing. And then every so often I'll leap back over into the commercial, like mainstream gaming world, and it's like, oh, we've got a $33 loot box where you can download a pair of shoes, but it's a 2% chance that you won't get it or something, like, and you're just kind of like, that whole thing is just designed to extract something out of you. But here are queer game developers going, no, actually the design of this game is to make you better.
Yeah. They've got no constraints. Nothing, no guardrails holding them in. One of the first things we did when we started doing the podcast together, you remember when we reviewed Star Wars Outlaws?
Oh my God.
So we were like, all right, let's just, because I pre-ordered that, right? And that was $140 to pre-order, right? So we were like, well, what is this $140 worth of value? And it was a perfectly serviceable, fine game that was just every single open world mechanic you've seen for the last 20 years with a Star Wars coat of paint on it.
Yeah.
And then exploring these games, it's just like, wow, the indie scene is just, they have nothing stopping them from going, well, I'm just going to play around with this little mechanic or this little idea and see if it works. And I can just do it in a neat little package that's maybe only takes you 10 minutes or half an hour to play.
Yeah.
But it's certainly going to leave more of an impression. I know a lot of the games we've played have left more of an impression on me.
Star Wars Outlaws.
The only impression Star Wars Outlaws left on me was a mark on my credit card.
Yeah. The mouse got you. The mouse got you, Al.
The mouse got me, absolutely. Something I was interested to ask you, if I can pivot to this for a second. So you've mentioned a few times that you've made a few games. In fact,
start out there.
I've
available now.
In fact, I just bought your bundle on Steam because it was on special.
Thank you very much.
Watch out for the reviews soon, by the way.
You can refund it if you've played less than 2 hours. Just letting you know.
How is your experience as a queer dev shaped? Did that play much of a role in kind of bringing the festival together? I mean, you kind of spoke about that a little bit before, but and I know you kind of mentioned before we recorded that you do still work on making games. Yeah. How is the festival kind of shaped you as a dev?
Oh, it's completely changed the way I think about games. I look at my first few games. Every pixel's burned into my eyes, and I love them.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a kitchen sink. Like I always throw everything at them. But then you get these gems coming into the festival where someone's gone, I'm just going to make a game with 3 colors.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I want out of this game, is that it's 3 colors or something. And you're like, there's a purity to that. Simplicity is so hard. Purity of concept and sort of being honest. Like, I'm always hiding behind spaceships and aliens and laser beams. And then you get someone who sends in a game about self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, the honesty in this is just something to aspire to, So yeah, those are just a few of the things off the top of my head that I get out of it. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you got anything you're working on at the moment?
I do have a little something. I do have it's a game called Gay Station Sunside.
Oh yeah.
And it's you go up to a space station for a holiday, and it's permanently bathed in sunshine. It's near the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And on first glance, that sounds really lovely. But when you think about that,
kind of a nightmare.
That's actually a really bad place to have a holiday resort.
For one thing, I like sleeping when I go on holidays.
Yeah.
yes.
Especially to a resort.
Yeah.
The ice cream will melt in seconds, I guess.
Oh no, not that main game mechanic of the melting ice cream.
Yeah. So I'm midway through that, so I'm very excited about that.
The festival is obviously coming up again this year.
Yeah.
So, and last year's was fantastic. There was it's pretty much shaped our entire podcast.
Thank you.
Is working for your list of games. But what have we got to look forward to with the festival this year?
Well, entries will be opening up in a few weeks, probably early June.
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably be open for most of June. Then we just have to wade through them all and try and have it ready for October. So yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically, because it's so volunteer run, it's basically what people feel like doing. So some years we have a thing called Bring It Back, where we pick up a game from maybe before the festival, but like, it's so long now, we could have a game from one of the years the festival's in. And we just sort of pick it up and hold it up again and say, oh, look at this game from like 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And maybe interview the creator if we can find them. But things like that.
Some of them can be hard to track down, trust me.
Yes. Oh, really?
But I've become a master stalker. I'm like, oh, wait, they have a Discord.
You told him enough.
It's part of my job.
And so I guess in terms of this new swath of entries that you'll be getting, are you going to be tweaking or changing like what you've been doing for previous years, or are you just going to keep it like as it's been going, like chugging along?
I mean, to get into the
weeds.
behind the scenes stuff a bit about it, we really need to set up like a committee or something. It's grown too big for just volunteers. Yeah. Just, reading the submissions off the website. It needs someone to coordinate. There's just, and I actually think that's kind of, unfortunately, sort of hurting the festival a bit. Like, it's just too big for what we're able to cope with. So,
yeah.
I mean, what a terrible problem to have, you know what I mean?
But, it's too big. That sucks.
Yeah. So you do see a lot of opportunities sort of fall to the side because there's just not the capacity to handle it. So, but then I don't have the skill set for setting that up, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a little plea for help just
I
there.
was going to say, is that an actual call out?
Are you looking for more people to get involved?
Yes, absolutely. Especially people with like project management skills or committee management skills or just finding people skills. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of like community elements around the festival outside of just having the site there and the games to play?
No. I mean, this is part of the thing, right? It's so lo-fi. It's mostly offline, mostly just a bunch of friends. But yeah, I mean, it's so strange to talk about that aspect of it because it's sort of like, here I am doing a podcast in a like a fancy room about this little thing that is like, I don't know. It's a strange situation. This is kind of what gay culture is a bit. It's just kind of like, it's just people just kind of doing their thing, and then
I mean, I can kind of see there's a bit of like
I'm struggling a bit with this, aren't I?
No, well, I can see there's an existential moment in what you've created with the festival, right? So it's this. It is as it is. It's a wonderful thing. It's done exactly what you said to do, and that is to create a space for the games. You said to us before we actually came into the studio, right? Like you always want it to be more about the games. Right?
Yeah,
I made a little joke that you were hard to track down. You said that's quite intentional. Right? So there's that existential moment. It's like, well, people love it, and people, there may be like, I mean, I must admit, even when I found it, I was like, oh, is there more? Is there like some kind of in-person showcase thing, right? And
well, we did in the first year, we did an in-person showcase, and that was beautiful, but it was very hard. There was a lot of organizing with that, and
I mean, you could continue, right? Like you can absolutely, because it works as it is.
Right, but if you're not growing, you're dying in a way. Part of me thinks that sometimes. This is getting a bit deep and meaningful. But
I mean, I guess like, I think Davey might be kind of correct, but at the end of the day, like it's propping up so many people with so much fabulous art. Like you mentioned it, like we've said before, like that's kind of the whole purpose of it. So the event itself, you can keep it however you need to, but it's giving the platform to all those people. So it's getting bigger outside of your control, but in like a really positive way. Like it's not like it's overrunning you or anything, but
I don't think I'm like micromanage, like over controlling it a bit, you know what I mean? But then, I do see things like, the Melbourne Gamers and the Checkpoint Joy FM is like Melbourne has a real, and your good selves. Melbourne has, there's critical mass here for making it a bigger thing than it is, but I just don't have that skill set. I mean, that doesn't keep me awake at night or anything. I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, that's how it is. But
maybe someone will listen to this and with the skill set might reach out to you. You never know.
But how would I know? How would I know that person?
We'll include some links in the description.
Yes.
No, and that's right. And
I mean, there's heaps of, because Screen Australia, they fund festivals as well. So there's plenty of opportunity for it to grow and get some funding.
Yeah, especially in the indie space. Like I know the Frosty Games Festival is coming up, which we really cover, and that is funded by Screen Australia. Like there are grants and funding and money available in this space. And I think, you mentioned that you don't specifically meet or interview the developers because you just kind of want to go into the games clean. But I mean, we've met a lot of them and spoken to them after the fact. And people all over the world, like it's touched them. Yeah. Like,
well, as I listen to your podcast, or I watch it, I must say. I mean, when people are so pretty, you have to you invest in the extra bandwidth on YouTube, whatever. But just those interviews have been just so in depth and interesting to me, especially. It's it was like you made them for me. Those, so I'm very pleased.
Just for you.
It feels that way. I mean, that's not a criticism of your view account, but
we got that one viewer.
But we do ask them, like a lot of them, like, how did it feel? When you found out that you were in a queer gaming festival on the other side of the world, like, Mo was just like, oh my God, I had a Google alert for the game and it popped up, and I was like, that's so amazing.
Cute. Yeah.
Aniko Fox was, and even when we mentioned it to Aniko, she was like, I won an award.
Yeah,
we're
like,
we know.
Splashed all over your website.
And that's its purpose. Is to, I really want to thank you for like picking up those games and running with it. It's very hard to get anything indie kind of in a public in front of other people, and anything queer especially, and for just like a mainstream podcast to kind of almost like
I know. I literally was about to say
we're in mainstream podcast.
I mean, I just did spend 20 minutes bagging out mainstream games, but take from that what you will. But but to kind of see your head jerk almost when you've come. Like, I think I kind of want to know the story. Like, you were sort of walking down the podcast street, and the queer games sort of passed you on the side, and you just went, "Oh, hey, wait a minute, what's this?" And then you've gone on this journey, and to me, this is kind of what I think a lot of indie devs and indie gay gamers go through, but you're kind of doing it in front of everybody.
Yeah. It has been an interesting journey. So, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, but, so I started this as a YouTube channel where it was literally just playing terrible games to bag the shit out of them. And then eventually Mitch came along and we were reviewing terrible games together, but then we started getting drunk and just talking about cheap games. But then we started branching into a couple of little other topics, free-to-play games.
And we always had a little section in the games called Make It Gay. So we were always looking for the queerness in games. So there was always a seed. There was always something there.
Yeah, and it was interesting, right? So like the show took on a couple of different iterations to find its identity. I think it was probably when we decided to go to PAX last year. Right, that's when we had the shirts made, and we're like, "Oh, let's go to PAX, and we'll take the little mobile. I'll buy the little mobile Rode microphones and my phone, and we'll just go and interview some people." And so I started looking into like, there'll be some indie games there. That'll be fun. We'll go play indie games and interview the indie devs, and
they'll be nice to us.
But then I found there was actually a lot of queer developers in the indie showcase at PAX here in Melbourne last year, and I think the world started going in a very interesting direction at that time.
October and November last year.
Yeah, let's call it what it is. Trump got into power, and queer people started coming under attack in the US and in other parts of the world. It seemed like rights were being reversed. As white cisgendered gay man, we sort of still held a slight place of privilege. And I remember you were like you were angry. You were like, I want to do something.
I still am, but
yeah. But you were like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, how do I do something?
I remember that conversation because it was very like, you watch like, I don't know, like, not to get too sappy, but like I am a queer person, but I'm a queer person of privilege. Davey's the same. Like we can pass in the street. I can walk down a street and like my life isn't in danger. Like I'm not under threat of scrutiny most of the time, depends on what I'm wearing. But if you're a person of color or a trans person or a gender non-conforming person, those kinds of things those safeties aren't allowed to use. So I was kind of under moral siege where I was like, well, what am I going to do with my privilege? What am I going to do with my platform? Even if it's small, no matter what it is. And then we just decided, we may as well uplift some voices. They don't all need to be like a minority and like suffering through art or anything, but we may as well utilize what platform we do have to celebrate that. And that brings light to queer joy and queer stories and queer tragedy. And I think the only way to like overcome, oh God, we are getting deep. The only way to overcome like hatred is like understanding and like shared experience. So if you can share this kind of stuff with people, like they're just going to understand that everyone's just people living their lives spinning on a rock.
I would absolutely, if I was a school teacher, I don't maybe have to get permission from something or whatever. I would in the curriculum have He F the Girl Out of Me paired with this other game, which name I've temporarily forgotten, which came out the same year, which deals with a similar topic, but in a completely different way. And just putting those two games next to each other, they're just so eye-opening, and you just come out of it with just a new understanding for a life that you don't live yourself, like walk 100 steps in someone else's shoes or whatever. It's absolutely the same with queer games. And just playing them is a revolutionary act. Especially playing them on stream is a revolutionary act for sure. Because the algorithms, I think part of the problem, as my perspective as a gay developer, and as the festival organizer, is the algorithm seems to say something's completely safe in the most sort of corporate, bland way, or it's completely unsafe and must be hidden away. And unfortunately, queer existence sits right in the middle of that. Just to talk about two boys kissing, you risk being shadow hidden on YouTube. You know what I mean? But straight people don't have that problem.
It's like it was just a bit of an eye-opening moment. And I think that's kind of what has colored the change in the show. And then like it's about, and this is a topic we've danced around quite a bit, but a lot of these indie games are personal stories. So being able to like live that personal story, you get to learn more about that side of the community. And that's why I think it's so important, because you can play a 1 hour long game and you learn so much about another person. You get to understand them. So,
well, you mentioned anger before, and I think that's super interesting, because we've had a swell of trans, and the trans developers, they always bring it. They just bring the most heartfelt, passionate games, and they bring angry games. But it's anger that has been like transmogrified into passion and like political action.
Drive
by making into a game. And these games, they're scathing. They're sort of holding up like transphobia, and just saying, look how ridiculous this is. The mere fact this exists is just so unbelievable to me as a trans person.
And
that's what I get out of those. That's what And in a way, I feel so selfish for being the privilege of being able to play these games. But it's just being able to take anger and turning it into passion. It's such a lesson.
And it's something that we won't really need to worry about, because we get to get away with living our lives kind of under the cover. So
well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
This has been a really, really like wonderful bow on this series that we've done with games that we played because of your festival.
Because of the developers.
Yes. And because of the developers, absolutely. Your festival just helped open that doorway for us.
Platform them for little old us to find.
And your deep dives have been really, really, really interesting. The Kitsune Tales one is actually genuinely great. I mean, there was a bit, I don't know how much time you've got, but there's the bit where they're talking about, we lost our level designer. But we had a friend who does speed runs for a living, and so they came on as level designer. I was like, that explains. I love that. I love that. I would love a speedrunner to design my levels.
I was just going to say, as a developer, as someone who makes games yourself, like to hear those stories, you must be like, oh my God, that's hilarious.
but brilliant too. Anyway. So thanks.
Well, Best of luck with the games that you've got coming
Gay
up.
Station Sunside coming soon.
Yeah. Wish list now.
Yeah. Find it on Hitch.
Yeah. And we'll include lots of links in the episode description to your games and to the festival. And we'll make sure we pass on our socials when submissions open.
Yeah. Cool.
And the best of luck. We will definitely be paying attention this year.
Yeah. Send your games in.
We
want your games.
We'll do it. But also I was going to say, please help us make more content and put more games in the festival. Give us more, please.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess before we wrap up, there's a little something we have to do.
Yeah.
Because we didn't do it.
We sure didn't. I was going to bring it up.
We didn't do it at the start.
No,
it's like the last 3 episodes we've done it at the end and not at the beginning. We can edit that.
I sure hope you do.
Yeah.
I won't edit.
We would like to give a big shout. We would like to give a big shout out to all of the BQN podcast network patrons, especially to this show's associate producer,
Sam Johnson.
Sam Johnson, who has a lot of recommendations about games that I should get you to play, by the way.
Oh, really?
Like older games. Like he wants you to play like the Oblivion remake and all this kind of stuff.
I would love to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
I need to dip my toes into older games. I just have this thing where when I view and play old media, if it looks really gross, I have like a really hard time enjoying it. So I'm going to do my best.
Yes.
I'll get a little drunk and I'll be like, sure, whatever.
Don't forget, if you want to help keep this and all of the shows on the BQN podcast network coming to you every single week, you can sign up to be a patron over at patreon.com/BQN for as little as $1 a month USD.
Or $2 Australian.
$2
Don't forget.
You can get all kinds of exclusive perks across the network, including early releases of our shows. You get the full uncut edition of Bargain Bin Gamer, unedited. And also All Good Things are also releasing an uncut version now as well. We also have our monthly Zoom catch-up and regular table reads and other exclusive items as well. So head on over to patreon.com/BQN.
Do it right now.
Do it. And also don't forget to join the Bargain Bin Gamers Discord. There is a link in the episode description. But hey, you've hung around for long enough. You've listened to us for long enough.
You've looked at us for long enough.
Thank you so much to Luke. Until next time, I've been Davey.
And I've been Mitch.
And we've been
the Bargain Bin Gamers.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye. Toodaloo. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give it a big thumbs up on YouTube or follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast from and leave us a 5-star review. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky and follow along on our live Twitch streams. You can also continue the conversation in our BQN podcast Discord by clicking the link in the episode description. Don't forget that the Bargain Bin Gamer is part of a larger network of podcasts called the BQN. You can support this and other BQN programs by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/BQN. We'd love to hear your feedback on the episode. Leave us a comment on YouTube or send us an email to bargainbingamer, GAYMER, @gmail.com. Until next time, au revoir.
Double T Media.